I'm joined right now by two of my absolutely favorite guests, Jared and Elizabeth Beck. Hello, Becks. How are you guys?
Hanging in there.
Took the words right out of my mouth. Hanging in there.
Well, we've got a very special show tonight because we've got an exclusive, a world exclusive interview with Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz. Now, Jared, I think regular viewers of Crowdsource The Truth who've seen our interviews before know that you are a Harvard Law graduate, right? Or is it Elizabeth? Which one of you guys went to Harvard?
No, I went to Harvard for my undergraduate degree, and I also went there for law school, and I got a master's from there as well. I never had a class with Dershowitz, though.
That's what I was going to ask you. And of course, Jared is also the author of the very important book, What Happened to Bernie Sanders. And, not being a cardiologist, this has nothing to do with what has recently happened to Bernie Sanders. This is Jared's take on what happened in the 2016 primary. And of course, Jared and Elizabeth are the principals at Beck and Lee, trial attorneys. They brought the class action lawsuit against the DNC, which has just been massive rigmarole. What I want to do before we get into too much other stuff is play this telephone interview with Professor Dershowitz so that everyone can hear it, because what we're really going to be discussing tonight are the latest developments. There was a judge's order yesterday in the Guiffre versus Dershowitz trial, which is a defamation suit that one of the Jeffrey Epstein victims, Virginia Roberts Guiffre, has brought against Professor Dershowitz. Is there anything that either of you guys would like to say before we play that?
No, let's roll the tape.
Okay, let's roll it, and everybody can give a listen to this. Mr. Dershowitz?
Yes.
It's Jason Goodman. How are you?
Good.
I was just calling quickly to congratulate you on what appears to be a victory in the Guiffre case. It seems like the decision in the case that came down yesterday is very much in your favor, this elimination of the Boise law firm.
Well, it is very much in our favor because it allows us to call Boyes, who will be our major witness. He will testify. He will have to testify that he didn't believe his own client, and that he told us in a recorded conversation that his client was wrong, simply wrong, that it was impossible for me to have been in the places she said she was. We will also question him about whether there was an exchange of money between him and his client and Leslie Wexner. Mm-hmm. That's a key element in our case. After all, the same woman who falsely accused Wexner of having sex with him on multiple occasions and making her wear Victoria's Secret type lingerie. Mm-hmm. And Boyes then had a secret meeting with Wexner's lawyers after publicly accusing me. He had a secret meeting with Wexner, and our view is that he basically told Wexner in terms or implication, if you don't want to have happen to you what happened to Dershowitz, there are ways of resolving this.
Wow.
That's called hush money. And so there are only two alternatives. Either Boyes didn't believe his own client and said, oh my God, she's lying about Wexner, in which case, how could he believe her about me? Because the identical allegations. Or he believed her about Wexner and let Wexner off the hook. This guy was worth $7-8 billion, who allegedly had sex with his underage client. Why would he somehow drop the ball? So we'll ask Boyes, and we'll ask Wexner, and we'll ask all the relevant people whether hush money was paid, and if so, how much, and under what circumstances, or did Boyes disbelieve? And there's no privilege there because he was not talking to his client. He was talking to an adversary. So Boyes will play a central role in our case, and we're free now to treat him like any ordinary person.
Yeah. There's a number of news outlets that are sort of reporting the failure of Judge Preska to dismiss the case as some sort of a loss for you. But isn't it really true that this is a major blow to Virginia Guiffre? She's going to have to find a new lawyer.
Not only that, but it's very rare that you get a motion to dismiss at this early stage. There's been no testimony taken.
Right.
We filed our motion to dismiss primarily to preserve the issue for appeal and to preserve the issue for trial. I'm trying to preserve the right of every American to be able to defend themselves against the false accusation. If the First Amendment doesn't protect my right to call a false accuser a liar, I don't know what it does protect. So we weren't surprised, and this gives me an opportunity to go to trial and to completely prove my innocence through the testimony of witnesses. So for me, it was a good day and a good decision, and we're looking forward to both vindicating the First Amendment and proving my total and complete and categorical innocence. Let me be very clear. I never met this woman. Mm-hmm. She made up the whole story from scratch. This is the only Me Too case in history where there's no evidence of any prior relationship between the two people. In every other Me Too case, they knew each other, they had sex, was it consensual, wasn't it consensual? In my case, I never met her. And you're not going to hear one scintilla of evidence that I ever met her. No photograph, no email, no witnesses, no contemporaneous complaint. She told all of her friends that she did not have sex with me. And she wrote in her manuscript, essentially, that she did not have sex with me. When did she suddenly remember she had sex with me 7 times? When she met David Boies. And that's going to be a key element. Why did she change her mind suddenly in the middle of 2014 when she meets David Boies? And we are going to be asking for an investigation of that issue. Because, look, suborning perjury, if it happens, is a very, very serious crime, and we want that fully investigated.
Well, it sounds like this would be a devastating blow to the Boies law firm if your statements are proven to be true.
Well, the Boies law firm is the most unethical law firm in the modern history of American law. They have had more complaints filed against them than any other law firm that I'm aware of.
Wow.
And they engaged in something just like this in the Klein case. Remember, Klein is a journalist, and she was in a lawsuit with her former boyfriend about plagiarism. And Boies came in and said, if you bring this lawsuit and don't settle, we will expose your whole sex life.
Wow.
And I have a book coming out about this, and I have a detailed analysis of the prior cases that the Boies firm has been involved in. If the Boies firm survives this lawsuit, it will be surprising to me. My new book is called Guilt by Accusation, The Challenge of Proving Innocence in the Age of Me Too, and it documents everything we've been talking about. It has appendices, which include transcripts of tapes, material that's never been provided before, FBI reports, emails. It will really blow the case out of the water.
Wow, it sounds like a very important book. You know, Mr. Dershowitz, I've become extremely interested in this case, not necessarily for the shocking and salacious details related to Jeffrey Epstein, but for what you've just pointed out. Not only in the age of Me Too, but in the age of the internet, it seems like every case that comes up, the general public wants to make a decision about guilt or innocence based on their personal feelings about someone as they see them on Fox News or whatever it might be. And I think this is an incredibly dangerous climate.
Yeah, it is. Not only that, but on the identity of the person.
Right.
Is it a male? Is it a female? Is it a minority? Is it?
Right.
Look, I had a journalist from the Columbia Journalism Review tell me I couldn't possibly be a victim because I'm a rich white man.
Oh, my God.
And I said, look, it doesn't matter how rich and how white and what your gender is if you're falsely accused.
Right.
You're a victim, and victims should speak out. Victims of sexual abuse should speak out, but victims of false accusations of sexual abuse should equally speak out, and I'm going to continue to speak out.
I appreciate you doing that. I think it's important that people remember that people do not have the right to be believed. We have the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Right. So I appreciate what you're doing, Mr. Dershowitz. I look forward to having you on the show when the book comes out, and thank you for this interview.
I would love to do that. Thank you.
Good.
Be well. Bye.
Have a good day. Bye-bye. So pretty interesting to hear directly from Professor Dershowitz. What do you guys think of that phone call? What do you think of what Dershowitz said? What do we think will happen in this case?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting statement from Dershowitz, but there's a lot of very interesting angles and layers to this whole case. Of course, you know, the underlying facts of the Jeffrey Epstein scenario, which we're never going to get to the bottom of because we're never going to be able to prosecute Jeffrey Epstein, you know, are troubling enough. But then you have layer on top of layer as sort of the peripheral issues attaching to Epstein migrate through our legal system. And I think the result is, you know, pretty astounding that you've got this case between Dershowitz and David Boies, who are two of, I think everybody in the legal profession would agree that these are two of the great American legal titans of our age. And they are both, you know, extremely prominent lawyers, but they're very different in a lot of ways. Dershowitz has always been a law professor who specializes in criminal law, and he's brought into these very difficult criminal cases like the OJ case, or before that, the Klaus von Bülow case. And he's sort of a courtroom genius when it comes to advocating for the rights of the accused. On the other hand, David Boies is somebody who started his career at Cravath, which is, I think it's fair to say, the most prominent, or one of the most prominent white shoe law firms in New York. And Elizabeth reminded me before this interview, but he actually rose to prominence when he left Cravath because he wanted to build a practice representing clients who had conflicts of interest with the Cravath law firm. So if anybody knows about conflicts of interest, it's this guy, David Boies.
That's interesting. Yeah, what do you think, Liz?
Well, my understanding of conflicts is there are areas where it can get somewhat complicated, but if you consult with someone on a matter, even if they end up not hiring you, or if you decline their case, you cannot thereafter agree to represent their adversary. The idea is that during the consultation, they gave you confidential information as part of the consultation. So if that potential attorney-client privilege relationship did not pan out, then that is not a particular case that you can get involved in. Yeah. My understanding of this case is that the Boies firm did subsequently take Miss Guiffre, I guess, Guiffre's case, and regardless of how people may have already prejudged Professor Dershowitz, whatever kind of emotional reaction you may have to the allegations, taking Professor Dershowitz out of the picture, I don't think what the Boies law firm did sounds kosher.
Yeah, and it's interesting because so many people are in the comments with us here, you know, saying really terrible things about Alan Dershowitz. I have no...
That's not the point.
Right. I have no personal relationship with Alan Dershowitz. I don't know him. I don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. The thing that got me interested in this case is exactly what I said to the professor. Right. It's exactly what I said to the professor, is that we're living in a time where, whether it's on the internet or on television, whether it's someone like you guys or me, the president, the Harvard law professor, people make up their minds and then they come into a public forum and say all these things, which really, if Alan Dershowitz is being honest, the guy has a right to be presumed innocent. He certainly has a right to due process.
Right. Right. And here's the thing. The law protects your right to the counsel of your choosing.
And to face the accused.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Let me finish. So that's sort of the starting principle. If you want to be represented in court, generally you have the right, if you can pay for whatever lawyer you want to represent you, you can have that lawyer represent you if that lawyer agrees to take your case. What you don't have the right to do, however, is have a lawyer who gives you an unfair advantage in the proceedings. So my understanding of this order that was entered by Judge Preska, I believe yesterday, or was it today?
It was yesterday. There's a sealed document today, Jared. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay. Oh, interesting. But my understanding of her order is that she looked at certain facts in this case and decided that the principals or certain members of the Boies law firm, including David Boies, were going to be necessary witnesses in the trial of the claims in this case, which are in the nature of a defamation claim by Veronica Guiffre against Alan Dershowitz, or Virginia Guiffre against Alan Dershowitz. Okay, so the defamation claim, it's a little bit, I believe the judge used the term legal jujitsu in describing the procedural posture of the case, but essentially Dershowitz was accused by this woman of having raped her, on Jeffrey Epstein's property. Dershowitz came out in public and said that that was a lie and something that was cooked up by her and her attorneys at the time, which was the Boyce law firm, and that he was willing to be sued by her in a defamation case in order to vindicate his innocence. And that's exactly what happened, is that she sued, the Boyce law firm sued on her behalf and sued Alan Dershowitz. So, and the way they pled the complaint is to deny that they were involved in a conspiracy to defame Alan Dershowitz. So it's a little bit twisted, but the gist is that because the complaint was pled to include facts that relate to what or Boyce did or did not do with the accuser of Alan Dershowitz, that places Boyce's testimony into play at the trial of this case. Because Dershowitz, as Elizabeth pointed out, Dershowitz has a right to put his accuser, whether that's the woman or whether that's her lawyers, on the stand and test their credibility. And the problem that our legal system presents is that the difference between a witness and a lawyer at trial is very, very fundamental. You can't wear both hats, okay?
It's like giving yourself brain surgery. It's just not done.
It's not only not done, but it's also can be extremely and would be extremely confusing to the jury, because what comes out of a witness's mouth is testimony that the jury must consider during its deliberations, but what comes out of a lawyer's mouth is not evidence to be considered. And the judge always makes this very, very clear when the judge gives the instructions to the jury before they retire to deliberate. So if you have one person like David Boyce, who's up there as the lawyer making arguments, but he's also at another point in the proceedings sitting on the stand and being cross-examined by Dershowitz's attorneys, then you have a very, very confusing system, or a very confusing situation. And it's for that reason that the law doesn't allow someone to wear both hats.
Jared, it was also, sorry to interrupt, Liz, but it was also my understanding from sitting in on the hearing a couple weeks ago that there was a matter of the testimony expected from David Boyce and I forget the name of the other attorney they're going to call, but it's expected to be prejudicial towards their client, which I understood to mean they're going to basically testify against their own client if they're being honest.
Right.
And that also sort of disqualified them. And the judge obviously agreed.
Right, because Dershowitz recorded Boyce basically saying that he had significant doubts about his own client's credibility. Right. And that is what, in this, this is sort of, goes into this notion of legal jujitsu. There's a lot of moves that are being made. Yeah, there's a lot of moves that are being made by these two very sophisticated legal forces, Dershowitz on the one side and Boyce on the other. And I would say in this case, Dershowitz got Boyce into a bind by acquiring evidence that has now successfully been used to knock Boyce out of the box before the game's even begun. And that's a real victory for him.
Well, the big loser here is Miss Virginia Guiffre, who clearly has not been served well by her lawyers. I think she probably would have been served better if the law firm did the right thing and said, I'm sorry, we can't take your case. We have some conflicts issues, which a lot of lawyers do say that. And then she would have found somebody cleaner and she could have gone ahead. But of course, that's not what happened. And of course, part of the reason that Ms. Guiffre's case, if her allegations are true, have been weakened is that the prime witness, which is Jeffrey Epstein, he would know. He would probably be the person who would know whether Professor Dershowitz and this young woman spent time alone, or if he saw them in compromising situations, is dead. The primary witness is dead. And generally in criminal cases, if the witnesses die, the prosecution's case can potentially be substantially weakened. So that's what happened here. So what happened between Professor Dershowitz and Mr. Frey is something that, at the end of the day, if there are no other witnesses, it's just the two of them and God. And, without any other evidence, just one person accusing you of rape is, it's hard, because in my opinion, an accusation of rape is difficult from other. Rape is different from other crimes, and I was thinking about why it's not as clean, is because in rape, it's not the act that makes it a crime, it's the consent. So as long as you can't murder somebody with consent, okay? If there's a dead person and they've been hacked into little pieces, it doesn't really matter if they consented before. It doesn't matter. But rape is one of those things that if there's consent, the same act is completely legal. And if there is no consent, the same act is completely illegal.
Although but I think the issue here is that this would be a statutory rape.
Right, but you have to prove that act happened, right? And so, is there?
And Dershowitz claims very vociferously that he's never met the woman, never been in her presence, and that these allegations only surfaced after she retained the boy's law firm, and she suddenly. Remembered, as he puts it, that Epstein forced her to have sex with Dershowitz. That's Dershowitz's side.
Remember, this is a civil case of defamation.
Right.
Well, let's stop there for a second, Liz, because you raise an important point. A lot of people have lost sight of the fact that this is not a criminal trial alleging that Dershowitz raped her, where he's going to be found guilty or not guilty of rape. That is not what is being tried in this courtroom. This is a defamation case where Virginia Guiffre came out and said Dershowitz had sex with her. Dershowitz said she's a liar. She now says because he's publicly called her a liar, that's a defamatory statement, and the lawsuit is strictly over defamation. A lot of people in the comments are still very focused on their dislike for Alan Dershowitz, either based on his prior clients, the cases he's been involved in, the way he presents himself on the news, the fact that he's a white guy, a Jewish guy, a guy, whatever it is that people don't like about him, they've made up their mind that Dershowitz is guilty. And even if Alan Dershowitz is the worst guy in the world who's done a ton of other things that are criminal or unethical or whatever, I think it's very important that people remain focused on the fact that if this is a false accusation, it doesn't allow someone to make a false accusation against a person just because they're a crappy person and have them suffer the consequences of a false accusation.
I've never met the guy. I don't particularly like Professor Dershowitz either. He seems to run with pigs, but I didn't know we had guilt by association. But anyway, the point is, this is not a criminal case. Ms. Guiffre has stated that Professor Dershowitz statutorily raped her when she was underage. Professor Dershowitz then said she's a liar, and then by publicly calling her a liar, she sued him for defamation. So, I got to brush up on my defamation law, but my understanding is truth is a defense.
Right.
So you can't defame someone if what you're saying is true.
Correct.
So I think one of the defenses they're going to raise in this case is, is Ms. Guiffre a liar or not?
Well, is the statement that she's making truth or false? So in that way, the issue of whether or not rape occurred could be tried in the defamation case as one of the elements of a defense to defamation.
Yes.
And what's interesting is that this lawsuit, my understanding is this lawsuit came about because Dershowitz got up and said to the Wall Street Journal in 2015 that he's innocent, and he invited her to sue him for defamation for calling her a liar in order to vindicate his innocence. What's noteworthy is that he did not agree, or there's been some uncertainty about this, but I think someone asked him, well, why don't you waive the statute of limitations for rape and agreed to be tried for the crime as a way of asserting your innocence, and that was not done.
Well,
That's
but Jared,
stupid. Why would anybody do that?
Exactly. I mean, isn't that like saying, hey, you know what? The blade on the guillotine is dull. Just put your head in there and we'll test it out. I mean,
That's the stupidest
well, right.
thing. That's
No one would do
Well,
that.
right. No,
Because he knows that even
but-
if he is innocent, anything could go sideways in a trial and suddenly
Right.
he could be on the hook.
Would you rather have people point at you at cocktail parties and say, I think he's a murderer, or actually be tried for first-degree murder and potentially get sent to like old Sparta?
Well, no. What he wants to do is a third option, which is to actually have a defamation case go forward in a forum in which he will bring evidence of his innocence forward and have a ruling that he did not rape this woman.
At the end of the
which
day,
could very well happen.
At the end of the day, this seems to be a trial about the allegations that Ms. Guiffre has lodged against Professor Dershowitz and his defenses in sort of a very sanitized and safe forum, because it's a defamation case. Nobody's going to jail in this case.
So yeah, that's an important point.
Nobody goes
Right,
to
because
jail.
it's a civil case, and the most that can happen if you're found liable for defamation is you have to pay damages to the plaintiff.
So if it turns out that Professor Dershowitz did defame Ms. Guiffre by yapping or going around and calling her a liar, then you have to put a number of how much is her reputation worth, and how much did he damage it, and what is that worth? That's the calculation.
And that'll be the end.
No one's going to jail.
And that'll be the end of the judgment.
Well, that would be the judgment if it's found in Guiffre's favor. It's also interesting to note that this interview that I conducted with Professor Dershowitz right outside the courthouse on the Second Circuit hearing back in March, Ms. Guiffre brought her lawsuit in April. So I wonder if his repetition of the challenge to sue him on this day might have further stoked the boy's law firm. I mean, there is a calculation being made in these type of civil suits, basically saying, hey, Dershowitz is an old guy, he's got a lot of money, maybe he doesn't want to be dragged through the mud, he'll just pay this woman to shut up and go away, right? I mean, that's a calculation that's sometimes
I think it's more than that. I think there's more going on here. Dershowitz boys, I mean, they both, in some sense, they come from the same, Northeast liberal legal establishment, but Dershowitz has been sort of persona non grata in that establishment for some time. I actually think he wrote about this, how nobody on Martha's Vineyard talks to him after he well, I know, but this is I'm trying to make a point here. After he sided with Trump or became sort of, favorable towards Trump. People, look, these people are, I mean, they have, I'm sure they have all kinds of grudges against each other. They're adversaries, they're rivals. I don't think a guy like David Boies, who's been, a handmaiden of the Democratic Party for a long, long time. I mean, the Boies Schiller firm has been, retained to do a lot of their dirty work over the years. I mean, look at the role he played in trying to shut up, in trying to silence the Harvey Weinstein accusers. Bush v. Gore, he argued for Gore. There's a long, long history with this guy. And there's also a long history with Dershowitz. A lot of animosity has built up over the years, I'm sure, between these two, especially as political divisions grow in this country. So I think a lot of what you're seeing has to do with that as well. I don't think this is a case just about trying to, squeeze some sort of settlement out of Dershowitz, although that's, a lot of what the Boies law firm does, among other types of work.
Wow.
But I think it's also maybe an attempt to bring this guy down. But Boies, it would maybe he feels it would be a feather in his bow to bring the great Alan Dershowitz to his knees. And,
it is a great tragedy.
He has a big target on his back.
It is a great tragedy of lawyers, despite whatever education they may have or whatever courtroom skills they may have or experience or money in the bank, when they lose their independence and when they become basically the lawyer, the go-to lawyer for a particular interest.
Yeah.
I think that becomes the unraveling and the downfall of that particular lawyer.
What do you
And I
mean,
think
Liz?
lawyers have to.
What do you mean by that particular interest?
I think
Like,
she's referring to how the Boyce firm has developed into a one of these sort of mercenary firms for the Democratic Party that really, you see them come up a lot. Perkins Coie is another one.
Yes.
The idea of a lawyer is, I think, people have different ideas and philosophies about what the profession is all about and how one should conduct themselves. But there is a certain type of law firm that attaches itself to a political interests and doggedly represents those interests no matter what, and that's always the calculus.
It's not even political. It can be a huge multinational corporation. You can do Chevron's bidding,
right?
And you can do Big Tobacco's bidding. But the point is, there's nothing wrong with representing Chevron or Big Tobacco when they come knocking at your door. Everybody needs representation, and if they can pay your rates, then go ahead.
Well, along the lines of Yeah, sorry, Liz.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I thought you were done, but please continue.
Oh no, I was just going to say, when that one law firm, a lot of your business comes through that, and then your law firm becomes tied to that pipeline of business, and they become.
That's where the ethical
then you
compromises start to happen.
Well, this is interesting, Jared, because along the lines of what Liz was just saying, Fireman John is with us in the comments, and he's asking if it's possible that boys would have done this to sabotage the case and protect the Clintons.
Absolutely. Protect who? What? That's a little bit attenuated. How does that work?
I totally see what he's saying. So yeah, this is. Look, Jason, you coined the term lawfare, to describe a certain type of litigation that goes on in our country, which is not necessarily about the underlying claims being litigated.
Right.
And I think this is a perfect example of it. And I think Fireman John is right on the track here.
So you have to spell this out for me. How does this work?
So. Look, I mean, the best way to create a distraction, to divert someone's attention from facts that you don't want them to pursue further, is to create a distraction, And what is a better distraction in the Epstein case with all these, issues that need to be hunted down and resolved? Namely, what the hell was Jeffrey Epstein doing, and who was behind this extraordinary child trafficking operation that was allowed to subsist in this country under everyone's nose for so long, and who was really behind it, and what was the purpose of it? We're not going to get to those issues, because what's going to happen is that all of the legal oxygen in the room is being sucked up by cases like this, which are totally collateral side issues to the main event.
Well, the main witness died.
Exactly.
So the main event is over.
That's what people. Well, no, that's another fact that we should be doggedly pursuing right now. What happened to Jeffrey Epstein? Are we just going to take the just going to sit down and accept this conclusion that he committed suicide, or are we going to actually pursue all of the evidence which suggests that something else may have gone on? Of course, we're just going to accept the former, because our justice system, in many ways, is proving itself not up to the task again and again and again. And I think longtime viewers of Jason's show will know what I'm talking about. But I, seem to remember, a little case called the A1 case, which didn't get resolved. With
even
any
locally, remember the Florida, the dentist, the hit.
Okay, there was another case that just was tried in Tallahassee, but it, it's just, it seems to be a recurring theme in our country that, crimes are committed, and yet we aren't getting to the end of a satisfactory justice process, and we're certainly not going to see that
it depends on
in
who's committing
Epstein
the
case.
crime.
Well, that's a
Right.
good point.
You know?
That's a very good point.
But this is just all getting back to what Fireman John is saying, is there sort of an ulterior motive? And yes, I think everything that David Boies does has to be viewed through the lens of what is he doing to advance the interests of the Democratic Party and the people that control it, because that's been, one of his, if not his prime functions, then at least one of his, very salient functions throughout his legal career.
Well, I mean, for me, one of the most interesting aspects of this is that, there's no subtlety to the fact that one of these two parties is completely lying. They're directly opposed. It's not like differences of opinion. Either this happened or it didn't. And one of them says it did, and one of them says it didn't. You raised earlier the point, Jared, that Dershowitz has been adamant, first of all, that he's innocent. Second of all, that he has this evidence. Seems difficult to imagine that a lawyer like him would play chicken claiming to have evidence that he doesn't have. The other thing I wanted to mention was when I was at the hearing, there was a closed door conference, after the public hearing, because they were going to review some of these, sealed documents that they had. And it was interesting to see that on the docket today, there was a sealed document entered. So maybe this is the transcript of the recorded Dershowitz phone call. People might recall that when I went to that hearing, that oral arguments hearing, I asked Professor Dershowitz if he would release the transcript of the phone call, and he said, of course. So he's not trying to cover evidence. He's trying to release evidence.
Why is that sealed? This is a pet peeve of mine. I am so sick and tired of federal courts sealing things willy-nilly. Right. It's supposed to be only done in very, very extenuating and unusual circumstances. Now they seal everything.
It's a matter of routine. Elizabeth's right.
That should not be the default.
Right.
Sealing documents should not be the default.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's something we encounter in our practice a lot is, courts that are very quick to seal documents. I mean, sometimes they have a legitimate reason.
They do, of course.
But it should be more than the parties just stipulating to sealing something, because I think, this is a case that the public has a big interest in, and we're not going to get a trial of Jeffrey Epstein. We know that much. So this may be the best we get in terms of at least some kind of trial on something related to Jeffrey Epstein. And, it's already very attenuated. It involves Alan Dershowitz and, a woman that he claims very adamantly that he's never met in his entire life. So, we know that Jeffrey Epstein himself did very, 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 very bad things because he pled guilty to that, and the government gave him a sweetheart deal. But unfortunately, I would say that this is just another example of how our justice system, even when it appears to be functioning because there's an active litigation going on and there's very high-profile lawyers on both sides, it's actually getting derailed. In a very substantial sort of way, and the public's attention is being derailed. And this gets back to the idea of lawfare, that there's some propaganda element going on here that's meant to divert all of our attention away from things we're not meant to see or think about or consider or ponder.
It's not just black and white. It's not just Miss Guiffre is telling the truth. They can both be lying. How do you know the two of them aren't having calls with each other and giggling about the lawsuit they cooked up? I'm just speculating here. You just don't know. You don't know anything. You don't know.
It's funny, you guys are so on point right now with what our viewing audience is thinking. I don't believe you are, but I would almost expect that you're looking at the comments as they come in.
No.
People are saying that Ghislaine Maxwell hasn't even been interviewed by the police, the FBI, anything like that. She was spotted at that In-N-Out burger right down the street from my old house in Hollywood. And I even called In-N-Out Burger. I had spoken to you guys offline about this. They threatened to sue me for publishing the phone call with their media liaison, and they were more interested in legally pursuing me than in providing the closed circuit surveillance footage from the restaurant to the FBI or the police to try to locate Maxwell. And John Mark Dugan came on the show, the former Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office deputy, and he said that he had sent an email to Maxwell that had been opened, and he had some sort of digital device there that allowed him to locate where the email was received. He said they were in Brazil. The Daily Mail or somebody like that went to this resort in Brazil, and they weren't there. So where is Maxwell? She should be being questioned and subpoenaed and interviewed.
Well, something that I think that you picked up on in your reporting on this is it almost seems like these elements, whatever elements are behind Ghislaine Maxwell, they're almost taunting the public, you know, to stage this photograph at an In-N-Out burger in public, just after, this whole Epstein thing happened.
Epstein might not even be dead.
Correct.
Again, without a rigorous public investigation.
I'm not cooking the body. How would I know? Even then.
Right. Well, without a rigorous judicial process that tries these facts in public, you're not going to know. I mean, that's the unfortunate thing that's going on. My sense is that Maxwell was granted some kind of immunity in some secret deal that was part of whatever was negotiated with Epstein. That's my sense. I mean, why else would she be running around, completely free and unworried?
Right. Eating hamburgers in the middle of Universal City. Yeah. We've also heard in an unprecedented, as far as I'm aware, statement from the former Labor Secretary that he was told to stand down when he was the U.S. Attorney there in the Southern District in Florida. I guess it's the Southern District of Florida. I've never heard a government official ever before say they were told to not do something by the CIA or some intelligence organization.
I'm sure they do it all the time.
Well, and that's what Fireman John is saying, that intelligence assets get help disappearing. I mean, it's so obvious to people who are listening to news on Crowdsource The Truth and other alternative sources that there is something fishy going on here, but we all really want this legal process to work. I'm not so much for blowing up the entire system. I just want to make it work properly.
Listen, I think we have to drop our naivete. So, because of the DNC fraud lawsuit, I get a lot of calls from people. One of them, and I'm not going to tell you who it was, but let's just say that in the 50 states, he is affiliated with the federal judiciary in some sort of judicial capacity. That's vague enough. And he said that, it's very vague. And he told me that, this is all hearsay, but this is what I heard. He told me that, FBI agent, he was talking to an FBI agent, and the FBI agent says, if we want an order in the court, we just call him. I think the FBI agent said, they call the judge. You see, you write this and order it this way. All right. Wow. So, yeah. I was like, that's why I said, I was like, whoa.
So what's the point of having a court if the FBI can just call them and get them to do whatever they want?
I don't really know, but I don't know why he told me that. Maybe he felt sorry for me.
Huh.
Well, look, I think.
I mean, he's a real person. I looked him up.
Yeah, but I think that look, my take on the system, and maybe this goes for our political system as well. But as far as the judicial system is concerned, it's a mixed bag. There's obviously some big problems in it right now for anybody who's been, everything from, what the heck happened in Las Vegas to Epstein to these, investigations of the Clintons that go nowhere and never happen, but we keep getting promised that, big things are on the horizon. again and again. I mean, it's clear to me that we're in a state where the wheels of justice have ground to a halt.
Forget about justice. There's a lot of bad things going on.
Right. Can I please just make my point though?
Go ahead.
And we can be upset about it, and we can demand. I guess we can all sit in our chairs in front of our computer screens and demand justice and feel crummy about it. Or we can start to try, I guess, to make a positive movement in a positive direction that's going to help our society, which in many ways seems to be seizing up every day. Go into a reparative direction. And
I let people cut me off on the freeway.
Well, I mean, okay, can you just please? I'm trying to get a thought out of it.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think, from my angle, I mean, things are not going to change as long as people continue to be in this hypnotized, highly propagandized state of just complete unawareness of what the hell's going on around them. And just by way of example, you've got, I recall watching your show when you were going to, I think it was the hearing, some proceeding at either a prison facility or a courthouse after Epstein was found dead in his cell.
Right.
And there were no people there other than you and maybe like one other person.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, this is the society we live in. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of chatter in social media. I mean, Elizabeth and I can't get on Twitter anymore because we've been censored and banished from social media. That's a topic for another day.
Yeah.
But if you, Liz, but if you do get on social media, or you get on maybe a show like yours, and there's discussion in the comments, there seems to be this sense that of growing awareness and dissatisfaction and real anger towards the system in all its forms. But when you get out into the real world or the physical world, you really don't see that. At least I don't see it. I mean, I see people, living their lives and being in a state of unconsciousness.
I have to disagree with you.
Okay.
First of all, I talk to a lot of people.
Okay.
Jared doesn't talk to anyone.
He talks to me.
Not as many people.
Well, yeah, but not strangers.
That's true. I'll grant you that, Liz.
When was the last time you talked to a perfect stranger?
Okay, well,
Can't remember.
Okay.
I talk to people all the time, and you'd be surprised how much people know. They're not going to just, start talking to you.
Well, but that's what I'm saying.
And I think
I'm not.
social
I guess what
media
I'm
is
saying.
a self-selecting
But
process.
that's what I'm saying. I think that gets to my point, though. Is people may have thoughts, and they may be thinking similar things, but there's no genuine public forum out there where people are actually discussing things in a genuine way. What we have instead are artificial public forums like Facebook, Twitter, you name it, which are really social engineering tools that the government has implemented, and they've been designed over many years for this purpose.
You don't want real public squares.
Right, but we used to have public squares in this country. Wasn't that long ago we had public squares?
Because people will gather in them.
Right.
They'll start talking en masse.
Okay, it's not just public squares. I'm talking about places of worship, churches.
Right.
I think people are so have become so beholden to these cyber identities.
Yeah.
Okay, because they're so tied to their devices now that the public squares that this country used to have been taken out from under us.
Let me reel you guys back
why,
for a second. Let me just reel you back for a second, because I want to get back to the Dershowitz thing and all that.
Yeah.
Because there's still a lot of people in the comments who I think aren't understanding what we're trying to put across today. Maria is saying, how exactly does some lawyer that Dershowitz was in the process of retaining, how does that lawyer's opinion of the opposing party matter? And my understanding of the answer to that question is that it's not a matter of this lawyer's opinion. It's a matter that this law firm, the Boys law firm, actually received a document from Alan Dershowitz. There was another lawyer in the firm whose name escapes me right now. I forget his name. But Dershowitz sent him a document. He believed that this law firm would be representing him. The next day, they said, we have a conflict of interest because we're representing the person that's suing you. And there was a conversation between Dershowitz and Boys that was recorded that contains information that will be entered as evidence. And the problem that arose is that Dershowitz is saying, look, this woman's law firm that's representing her is going to be called to testify, and they're going to testify against her, so they can't also represent her. That's the essence of Mr. Dershowitz's argument that was decided in the judge's order yesterday. And the other interesting thing along the lines of what Jared was just saying, social engineering, is that it's not just the secret agencies in the government that are doing this. If you look at any mainstream newspaper from 8 p.m. last night till today, they have almost all positioned this as Dershowitz failing to get the case dismissed. But in fact, this was a legal victory for Alan Dershowitz. Whether we like him or don't like him, that's a fact.
Yeah, and you know, oftentimes you can, well, first of all, oftentimes from as a strategic matter, you can get a case to go away that's been filed against you by disqualifying the lawyer bringing the case.
Right.
And that's because the lawyer, you know, may be playing a constituent and, you know, indelible role in actually making the case happen. And that's actually what Dershowitz's theory of this case is that he was only brought into the fold of accusation because Boys got involved representing this woman and planted, you know, these ideas in her head as a vendetta against him.
Well, if that's true, that's quite unfortunate.
What he's specifically alleged is that someone within the firm convinced Guiffre to bring these charges in order to write a book. And if that's true, even if Alan Dershowitz murdered 50 people before this, we can't just say we don't like the guy, so let him get sued or let him go to jail or whatever.
Right.
Everybody deserves to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. And for all the people putting comments in here that are negative about Alan Dershowitz, it's fine for you to have a negative opinion of the guy, but he's got to be treated fairly if any of us want to be treated fairly.
This isn't about Dershowitz. The issue here is not about Dershowitz. It's about Boys. Now, just because you don't like the you know, one party doesn't mean all the lawyers in the case are angels. You know, forget about Dershowitz for a second. Conflicts of interest, as far as I'm concerned, tend to be fairly clear. And there's an old story that, you know, in high-powered divorces, if one side knows that a divorce is pending, they'll call every high-powered divorce lawyer in town and do a consultation so they can conflict them out against getting hired.
Well, he might
by
be
their
doing that. He may
soon-to-be.
well be doing that.
And that's perfectly legitimate. You know, it's.
But
so,
the fact is, but it's not the conflict of interest that got the Boys firm disqualified.
It's that they're a material witness.
Exactly.
No,
you know,
it's the theory which says that.
Forget about Dersh. This is about David Boys.
Right. Well,
this is about the presumption of innocence.
No, hold on. It's about how David Boys pled the case for his client. That's what the judge said.
He sounds kind of like a crappy lawyer. Maybe he should retire.
Well, I think what you're seeing, and Elizabeth, you know, may be stating it somewhat brusquely, but she's actually making a point here.
I get to the point.
The point is that he is inserting himself into his client's claim, and he actually did that in this complaint. What he did was he pled, or his firm pled the complaint to say that Alan Dershowitz had defamed this woman by accusing her of conspiring with him to levy false allegations against Dershowitz. So by making that an element of the case, he placed himself in the role of being a material witness, and that's what makes the conflict rule apply.
Right.
What would be cleaner is if the law firm of David Boys, as co-plaintiffs with Mr. Free, hire another lawyer to sue Professor Dershowitz for defamation. See, that would be very
well. That's
clean.
what they're going to
Yes,
have
but
to
it
do.
would-
That's what they're going to
But
have
it
to
would
do now.
require, but here's what's going to happen. So now you're going to be asking, these other law firms are going to have to do their due diligence,
Right.
and they're going to have to be able to investigate all the facts. And if I were being approached with a case like this, I would want all of the files to be opened up to me. And let me tell you something, some of the worst clients in the world that a lawyer can take are other lawyers.
Why is
lawyers
that?
are experts. It's because they're experts at hiding facts and skewing facts for their own benefit.
I think
And you can bet that David Boyce, when he's shopping this case around
he's probably
to
a
other
nightmare
law
lawyer.
firms, right, nightmare client.
Nightmare client.
Yeah, because he is going to be using, whatever tricks this distinguished man has up his sleeve to convince these lawyers that he's trying to get to represent him and his client that this case is a legit case.
I gotta tell you, I'm very picky when a lawyer approaches me with a potential.
Yeah.
I'm very picky. I'm like,
Yeah, I mean, you have to, as a lawyer, you should be.
And the reason is not because I don't want to represent lawyers. I'll very happily represent lawyers, but a lot of times I think with some lawyers, they think that they can do the case themselves, but they're too busy, so they just need an assistant. And at the end of the day, you can be a great lawyer, but if you're part of the case, it colors your judgment.
Right.
Because you're human, colors your judgment.
Right,
and so you have to have a dispassionate person, even if technically they're not as good a lawyer as you. You should have a dispassionate person, handle your case,
Right.
because they're not invested in it
Right.
the way you are emotionally. That's important. But a lot of times, when a client is a lawyer, I would imagine that they have problems trusting their lawyer. Now, we won't talk about.
But guys, isn't it also a problem, like, as you're saying, if, let's say, Mr. Boyes said to Guiffre, hey, you know what, for X, Y, and Z reason, I'm too involved in this to be your lawyer, but because of these circumstances, I'm going to be a fact witness. Why don't we both get representation from this other firm? That's different than now, today, October 17th, going and saying, hey, this bomb exploded in our face. Can you come take it over? I mean, this is a little bit like somebody hiring me to work on a film
Well, first
6
of all,
weeks
they're
in
going
after it's been a disaster, rather than coming to
Yeah.
it from the beginning and planning it out your way and all that.
No, first of all, Boyes is going to go right up to the Second Circuit and appeal this.
They
and,
said that, yeah.
Yeah, so he's not going to let this issue drop that easily. Secondly, this is actually a sanction. Okay, this isn't just a normal order. I mean, it's not called a sanction, but it's a violation of the rules of professional conduct.
Yeah.
Okay, when you're talking about conflict rules, such as the ones that are invoked in this order, you're talking about something that's supposed to be taken very, very seriously by all lawyers, which is how you conduct yourself in your relation to other lawyers and your client. Okay,
Right.
And what this is a finding is that that the
I feel
Boyce
bad for Miss Guiffre.
Right. Well, you feel bad for any client that's being mishandled by their lawyers or isn't getting good representation or is being used for some nefarious purpose.
Yeah.
And I sense all of that is going on in this case. Furthermore, this is something that could be referred to the bar potentially. And if you Google David Boyes, you're going to find a number of sanction orders against this guy and his firm, and very, very serious. Not like little like sanctions orders, like you missed a deadline or something. I'm talking about like being ordered to pay whopping fee judgments and being found to have engaged in really unethical conduct. And in fact, he was involved in the Harvey Weinstein case, and he was basically trying to squash all of the Harvey Weinstein's
Isn't that considered
accusers.
witness tampering?
Well, right. I mean, it's this is it's very thuggish, mafia-like behavior. But I said at the outset
But he
that
wears
this
such
guy.
nice suits.
I
How
said
could he
it-
be a thug?
I said at the outset that this guy, has been doing dirty work for the DNC for a long
I'm so
time.
fucking
Can
sick
I,
of
can I
DNC.
just
get a word out, please?
Calm down,
Okay,
guys. Please, calm down.
It's very tense these days.
Calm down. Calm down.
No, like this guy, I lost my train of thought. Okay, but
Dirty work for the
you know,
DNC.
dirty work for the DNC. Okay, and they, I mean, the Seth Rich cases. Okay, he's been involved. His firm has been taking all of that litigation against the, anybody who asks questions about what happened to Seth Rich.
Really?
They get slapped with a lawsuit by Seth Rich's family for causing them, emotional distress, for trying to, pursue, who murdered this guy. Okay? I mean, it's the most bizarre thing. And yet this is what the David Boies law firm engages in. Okay? So I don't have a very high opinion of them. My opinion of Alan Dershowitz has nothing to do with the matter. Okay, but I think people maybe need to refocus their attention from Dershowitz, who gets a lot of attention because he's kind of a lightning rod. He's on TV a lot. He has a very outsized personality. I mean, David Boies is a little more understated. Okay, he's a little more soft-spoken, but he has a much bigger operation, and I think his connections go much deeper, and I think the kind of stuff that his firm has been involved in has been very, very nefarious. And I think Dershowitz is 100% right when he tells you in that interview that this is maybe one of the most unethical firms in American history.
Wow. That's really important insight, Jared. And it's also, I think, important to note that so many of the people who are making comments have basically just decided that, well, Dershowitz was photographed with Epstein in the Harvard shirt. He's been on the Epstein Island, so he must be guilty.
But I wore my Harvard shirt in honor of this interview.
I appreciate
holding
that.
it up there.
The point that I want to get across most importantly is that even if Dershowitz went to the island, even if he rode on the jet, even if he defended all the worst murderers in history, it does not automatically make him guilty of any particular accusation from any particular person. And it's important, to me at least, that we all respect this notion of the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. It's one of the very most important rights that people fought and died for in the establishment of this country, and for it to be totally thrown away in this age of the internet is so dangerous to me that it's not about whether you like Alan Dershowitz or dislike Alan Dershowitz or like or dislike David Boies. It's about the facts, the evidence, and the due process of law.
What Professor Dershowitz did or did not do on the Lolita Express really has nothing to do with Boies Schiller getting booted off the case. Boies Schiller got booted off the case because of what Boies Schiller did. And so what they did was, the court found that what they did or didn't do or failed to do warranted them getting kicked off the case. So that's what that's about.
I mean, the lesson is as a lawyer, you can't get too involved in your client's cause.
Yeah.
Okay. Once you find yourself in the position of actually being, a witness to whatever claim you're pursuing, you probably should, get your own lawyer involved in order to get your own judgment straightened out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we're just sorry, yeah, Liz.
Okay. No, I was just going to say Boies Schiller has a lot of lawyers, so you can't have it both ways. If you want to have no conflicts, you can be a lawyer of one person. And then, the conflicts are much lessened.
Yeah, we're just about out of time. I want to let all of our Periscope people know I got deep love for Periscope, but the multi-chat app only allows me to read Periscope comments. I'm hoping they'll update it so I can respond. But I missed what Foxy was saying there on Periscope, but love everybody on Periscope, love everybody on YouTube, BitChute, all the different channels. I'm super delighted to have had Jared and Elizabeth Beck join us tonight.
Always a pleasure.
People who aren't familiar with Jared and Elizabeth can go and visit their website. It is beckandlee.com, and if you've got a need for a trial lawyer and you're in the Miami-Dade area, give everybody all the information they need to know about the law firm.
Call 305-234-2060 if you have a civil dispute in Florida.
Very enthusiastic endorsement, Elizabeth. But you guys specialize in personal injury, investor rights, consumer rights, real estate disputes, antitrust,
Listen,
class action, and whistleblower litigation.
You know, people walk in the door. I talk to them. If I like their case and I like them, I'll consider it. And then,
Right.
you know, then you got an attack dog on your side.
Well, Elizabeth is an absolute expert at depositions. She had Donald Trump shaking, and that's not to say that they're anti-Trump, but you know, it's an adversarial system, so you do what you can do. And of course,
I took the deposition of a gentleman by the name of Raj Goyal. I wasn't expecting that. Raj Goyal, he kind of showed up in the case unexpectedly.
I don't think we want to talk about that. Jared looks like he doesn't want to talk about
never
that.
mind.
But people should go and purchase Jared's book, What Happened to Bernie Sanders. Nothing to do with his recent cardiac problems, but rather the totally unscrupulous behavior on part of the DNC, Hillary Clinton, and all of those people. I love having you guys on the show.
I'm back. I'm still running. Nothing happened.
It was amazing to see how alive he was at the debate the other day. I think it was almost set up just to show that.
Medino Crow.
No, I mean I'm happy that that he was able to recover from.
Yeah.
I'm not a Bernie Sanders fan anymore, but I'm happy. I'm always happy when somebody recovers from a serious condition.
Yeah, we don't want anything bad to happen to Bernie Sanders, but he's feeling very much like when you see your ex-girlfriend across the way in a restaurant years after, and you're like, what the hell was I thinking? But that's enough about Bernie Sanders. I want to thank you guys.
His daughter-in-law died.
Yeah,
Tragic.
Who died?
Very suddenly. His daughter-in-law, just a few weeks
Bernie
ago.
Sanders?
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
Look
Something
it up.
else to look into.
There's been very little publicity about it.
Yeah, I will look it up. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining me tonight and giving us that great legal analysis. I do want to thank Alan Dershowitz for agreeing to speak to me. He certainly didn't have to do that. It's a very interesting case, lots of complicated things going on, and for people who like to observe the law and study lawfare, as Jared said, I'm not sure if I coined the phrase, but I am very interested in that practice and how expert lawyers and the FBI and various politicians can employ it. I want to thank all of the viewers out there and remind everybody that Crowdsource the Truth can't bring you this type of news without your support. And it's important that the viewers are the sponsors of this show, because we've seen what happens when billionaires own the news outlet and take their sponsorship from billionaire corporations like CNN, The Washington Post, New York Times. You've got people who don't have your best interest controlling the flow. So to avoid any undue financial influence over the reporting, it's very important that you go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become a sponsor. Jared and Elizabeth, thanks so much. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a great night.
Thanks for having us, Jason. Take care.
My pleasure, guys. Take care.